Be Frankie.
Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix.
Yo, what's good? It's your boy BDELL. If you're new to this channel, hit that like button, hit that share button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. Today I'm going to be breaking down the celestial phenomenon, the blood moon, and how it's esoterically connected to the numerical spectrum of our reality that works in synergy with monotheistic context. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, get those notes out. You already know what time it is. Because there's a lot of incantations and rituals that's going to be taking place within the factions of the month of March, right? So we finna get into this Draconian blood moon. This is not a ordinary blood moon that we're looking at here, right? Because everything, like I said, the universe is mathematical. So everything, you got to look at it from a numerical codex. You got to look at all this stuff from a numerical codex. So when you're looking at the dates of March 14th, right, you having a blood moon eclipse that's going to be taking place on the planet. So this celestial phenomenon, what I did was I took March 14th from September 7th, you get 177 days. And then from Saturday, March 29th of 2025, all the way to September 21st, 2025, you get another 177 days. And then from March 14th to September 21st, you get 191 days. And then from March 29th to September 7th, you get 163 days. So what I did was I took 163 plus 191, you get 354 divided by 2, you get another 177. So you get 3 total increments of 177. So what I did was I took 177 times 3, you get 531. Then you take 5 plus 3 plus 1 plus 9. You get 9, which is not ether activation. Then you get 177 divided by 3, you get 59. 5 plus 9 equals 14, which is basically the embodiment of the piece of Osiris, the 14th piece, which is rebirth and resurrection. And then you also got to look at the numerical spectrum of from October 14th, when you had the Ring of Fire solar eclipse that took place on my birthday on 2023. And then on March 14th, you had that we having a blood moon eclipse from March 14th all the way up to October 14th. You get 518 days. So you take 5 plus 1 plus 8 equals 14 divided by 2, you get 7. So that's basically the 7th seal being unlocked by way of these celestial alignments. So also, when you look at it from a numerical standpoint, when you go to Revelations chapter 5 verses 18, right, it talks about the scroll and the lamb. The scroll is a scroll of all. The scroll of all is activated by way of the non-ether activation that works in tandem with the lamb, because the lamb is the ancient Alpha symbol that was basically over the geographical landmass of America, which is basically the embodiment of judgment. So a lot of these celestial alignments, a lot of these planetary alignments, and all these blood moons, lunar eclipses, these are basically omens. These are basically signs in the stars that's basically correlated with monotheistic context, if you understand the esoteric side of it. So that's what's going on. So screenshot this if you will, because like I said, 177 days is not a coincidence that all these is 177 days apart. And then I took the March 14th of 2025, September 21st of 2025. That is exactly 354 days total. And you divide it by 2, that's 177 again, right? So the numerical spectrum actually works in tandem with the celestial alignments that's taking place on the planet right now, and then it correlates with scripture. So that's why I said, when you understand what the Prophet Noble Drew Ali said, he said, do not throw away your Bibles, because in the end times, you're going to need it to condemn the European nations with it, right? Because like I've been telling y'all, the Bible is a Freemasonic playbook. I used to be one of those people where I'd be like, man, I ain't reading that Bible. But once you get tapped into the esoterics of it and you find out it's actually a Freemasonic playbook, it's actually a timeline of prophetic divination that's according to the biblical prophecy that was connected to the Piscean age of darkness under the lunar cycle. Because that's why all the religions, they work off the Sabbath, right? These are all lunar doctrines. But now we're in the sun cycle. So all these celestial alignments is basically eradicating the illusionary perception of the simulation. Now, also the embodiment of the blood moon is basically a representation of the north node, which is Rahu eating the sun, right? And many different other mythologies, they also talk about how Rahu comes from the Draconian star constellation. So this is basically the embodiment of the fall of the dragon as well, because the dragon was also correlated to the Vatican popes of Rome. When you understand the Vatican prophecies, this is all connected. And it's also connected to the mythology of Mesopotamia. The Anunnaki were a group of deities that included sin, because the Babylonians and during the process of Mesopotamia, they called the moon sin, right? Because the reason they call the moon sin, because it's basically the embodiment of the material world, which is basically external stimulation, which makes you an antichrist because you are anti yourself, because now you have an emotional connection to people, places, and possessions, which is part of the dualistic paradox in the illusion, because the illusion in itself is actually sin. So that's why the Anunnaki, they call the moon sin, because as I told you in the last transmission, the moon was told into our solar system from planet Jupiter by Draconian reptilians, who was also known as the cherubim, who was also associated with the dragon, right? The negative faction of the dragon, the Luciferian Anunnaki. So that's why the Anunnaki were believed to be descendants of An, which is basically the personification of Anu, which is basically the abode of the Most High, which is basically the embodiment of the magnetosphere, the god of the heavens, and Ki, because Ki means Kai, Kai means planet Earth. When you see that little G in the Freemasonic symbol, G is a representation of geometry. The prefix of the word geometry is Geo. Geo is translated to Ki, which is QI, which is Chi. So that's why they call it Planet Chi, right? So it's not a coincidence that all this is basically syncing up. Now, you got to understand the mythology of the blood moon. It is believed that the lunar eclipses was caused by an animal or a serpent. Now, like I said, we in 2025, which is the 9 year. The 9 year is the activation of the Kundalini energy as it rises up the 33rd vertebrae and then travels up the third and fourth ventricle of the brain, and it activates the pineal gland, which is basically connected to the galactic center. So this is why the Pope, the Vatican popes of Rome, the papal keys, they using it, the cosmic keys of the golden key and the silver key, they're unlocking the golden gate. When they unlock the golden gate, that's when the pineal gland reaches its apex of mastery, reaches the apex to where you're able to tap into the Zohar body, and to where you're able to leave the gematria body by leaving the silver gate of Saturn and the moon, because you have a moon gate and then you have a Saturn gate. Those are basically the gates of reincarnation. But now we're breaking out of that paradigm. When you break out of that paradigm, that's when you're no longer a spiritual parasite that's no longer acclimated to the lunar cycle. So we in the 9 years. So as you're looking at this picture right here, you can see the dragon. The dragon is pulling off the energy of the moon. This is why you see the blood, right? It's a form of energy extraction. That's why everything within the factions of our simulation sucks up microscopic waves of energy from your physiology, right? This is also associated with the AI guide. The same thing with the dragon energy does as far as the moon, technology extracts neurons from the body. So everything that you see that's associated with these lunar doctrines is basically the embodiment of energy extraction. That's what this is all about. That's why the moon turns red, because it's basically harvesting the energy of the divine feminine energy. So that's why the woman is out of balance, right? If the woman is out of balance, the whole household is out of balance. If the household is out of balance, the civilization is out of balance. So this is why we got to go through reset by way of the laws of Mayat, which is equilibrium, which is balance, which is basically equated to God. So also it talks about, it is often stated that Christ was crucified and resurrected on a total solar eclipse when the sun and the moon are joined, a blood moon in 33 AD, right? Now the coincidence. Now, when you look at the two Kemetic instruments at the top right here, it shows you the crucifix and it shows you the Ankh, right? This is basically the embodiment of the age of Aries and Libra, right? And once you follow the path of the middle way, which is the path of Malakut, that's when you unlock the golden gate. Because you got to understand the inception of the inanimate aspects of creation, right? Which is basically plant, animal, protoplasm, man, mankind, cherubim, and seraphim. Or when you're talking about the Anunnaki, Enki, and Enlil, right? Those are basically the 7 cycles of creation. So the moon was told into our solar system, which makes you a spiritual parasite, because now you have a body that's connected to the material plane. So when you break out of the square, that's when you tap into the energy of spiritual metamorphosis by way of the energy of the sun that basically eradicates the perception of the moon, that is facilitated by all 3 monotheistic religions that work in tandem with with the Freemasonic order. So this is why you see the dragon extracting energy from the moon that extracts energy from our physiology. So the blood moon is actually a ritual for the archons to extract energy. But the illusion is starting to fade because the veil is officially being uplifted, right? So we're going to go to the next slide. So when you break down the etymology of the word blood in ancient Hebrew, right, it talks about the Hebrew word for blood is actually Adam, which is basically the Hebrew word for earth. So Adam is atom, atom, or amun. As above, so below, as in heaven, so on earth, right? So this is basically the dualistic energies of the dualistic paradox that controls the simulation. Because like I said, dualism in itself is deception. Dualism is the illusion. So when you follow the path of the middle way and you're not subjected to right or left or Democrat, Republican, Christianity, and Islam, when you follow that path of the middle way, that's when you unlock the key of the bottomless pit and you go to the apex of heaven, which is the galactic center, which is the black sun, the black chakra in the middle of your head that harmonizes with planet Earth as it's going through a spiritual metamorphosis, right? So that's what this is all about. So you got to understand the esoteric sciences and figure out how it basically is correlated to the celestial alignments and is correlated to biblical scripture or whatever type of scripture that you're basically reading, right? Because there's truth and edification in every type of publication that you read. You cannot be so woke and so spiritual that you just discard the Bible. Don't read it just like how a Christian read it. Read it for the esoteric information, because when you understand their timeline, you can see what's going to happen next by way of biblical prophecy, right? So now you got the moon turning to blood red on March 14th, which is 3:14. So what I did was I went to John 3:14. And as you can see, you got the serpent on the crucifix. So as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be lifted. So that, like I said, when you go back to the galactic center, that's when you activate the 3rd and 4th ventricle of the brain, which is the Christ oil, to activate the Kundalini energy, which is the Christ consciousness. That's when the Son of Man, the messianic figure, or the 144,000, which is a frequency, not a demographic of people. This is the frequency that activates the 9 ether on the planet that basically reverses the polarity to where you get up to the stairway of Sirius, right? To where you're no longer subjected by the tricknology of the moon that is facilitated by the 7 sisters, the 7 planets of Pleiades, right? Because the Pleiadians, they are the ones who created the lunar light lock on the Van Allen belt that keeps you in a reincarnation cycle. So since we're breaking out of the illusion, that means that the embodiment of the moon, the silver key, is basically the Catholic papacy that's basically eradicated when the Pope, when he passes away. That is basically the apex of the fall of monotheistic religion in itself. So this is why they want to use globalism in a form to basically resurrect pseudo forms of European mythology when you're talking about religion. So this is how you break out of the Saturnian gate. The Saturnian gate is basically eradicated when you activate the raising of the Christ oil, the magic of the third and fourth ventricle of the brain, right? And it produces a magnetic milk. And that magnetic milk connects you to Ophiuchus. Ophiuchus is Jesus walking on water and the galactic center, where you get back to Sirius right here, where you see my cursor. Because I told you, when you get caught up in dualism, sun and the moon, Jack and Boaz, Democrat, Republican, right? When you get up Islam, Christianity, you follow the path of the middle way. That's when you go back to the Father, or when you go back to the Great Mother, whatever you want to say, right? That's what this is all about. They know what time it is on the planet. So this is why, like I said, biblical scripture and dates and the numerical spectrum hold on, is correlated with biblical context, right? You got to pay attention to the signs and symbols, because this is how you activate the light of God to where you basically are reborn, because it basically activates the hypothalamus gland that works in tandem with the endocrine system. Because when your endocrine system is in alignment, that is the hypothalamus gland, the thymus gland, and the pineal gland, right? And it's going to resonate a certain frequency to where it basically illuminates the crown. That crown is the golden gate. That golden gate is the galactic center. The galactic center is Ophiuchus. The Ophiuchus is the black sun, right? So that's what these keys was basically talking about here. It was unlocking the key of Solomon. Solomon, when you break down the etymology, it means the soul of man, Solomon's temple, which is fire in the middle, the pyramid, where you connect back to the energetic frequency of the soul to where you're able to tap into your higher self by going back to the Sirius star constellation, right? So before we get too far, I'm going to show you a video. Hold on for a second. I'm going to show you how they put all this in the news and everything. So we in that time, ladies and gentlemen. Like I said, if you're new to the channel, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit that subscribe button. Don't be a monitoring spirit and just be on the channel and not subscribing and you just getting information and you're not sharing the videos. The purpose of these videos is to give people the edification and clarity about what's going on in a timeline sequence. Because if you look at all my videos, they basically line up. It's basically an esoteric storyline by way of the celestial alignments, by way of biblical prophecy, by way of, metaphysics and quantum physics and mind science technology and civics. All of it basically correlates, right? This is one big esoteric piece of the pie. And we almost at the end, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm going to play this video. Because we in that time period, we in a 7-year tribulation. Hold on for a second. It's kind of frozen up. All right, here we go. Kind of froze up a little bit. But like I said, we ain't going to let them stop, the transmission, because we're going to keep demonstrating the knowledge every chance that we get. Because one thing you got to understand, the timeline is speeding up. That means the vibration of the planet is starting to speed up. So that means that I have to pump out more information to where everybody's vibrating on the same mental frequency and understanding what's going on the planet, right? Because as I was telling you guys before, ether travels on 0-point energy fields. That 0-point energy is the reset. So everything is being resetted in our atmosphere by way of the activation of mind science technology, by what you think, by what you say. Because you're basically unblocking the encryption that was facilitated by the energy of the moon. So that's why the moon is going through a blood moon ritual. It's the end of the process of everything that was connected to the Piscean age of darkness by way of the Vatican popes of Rome that created these religious systems. Because we all know that religion was created in 325 AD at the Council of Nicaea. Then you had the Council of Eucharist when you're talking about the Greeks in the Hyksos dynasty that infiltrated ancient Kemet. All these are basically lunar doctrines that happen by way of colonization, right, and imperialism. So now, since everything is resetting, these celestial alignments, these planetary alignments, these lunar eclipse, these solar eclipse, all this is basically is the embodiment of judgment and omens, right? So that means that we're going through a spiritual metamorphosis. Everything has to shift. We're going through the shift right now. The signs is basically in the celestial bodies. And when you understand the numerical codex of everything that's basically taking place on the planet. So I'm going to play this video for you guys.
Solar eclipse last April, still fresh in many people's minds. We wanted to tell you about another eclipse happening next week. It's a lunar eclipse, and it'll be unique because it'll be a full red or blood moon eclipse. Krista Rose has more from the planetarium at St. Vincent College.
John Fogerty once saying there's a bad moon on the rise, and maybe he was referring to what's coming our way next week in the wee hours of the morning of March 14th. While people may remember the big solar eclipse from April of last year, Dr. Daniel Vandenberg from St. Vincent College says that there's a...
Now, as I was telling you guys before, remember I told you that everything is esoterically connected. Everything is connected. You cannot discard everything that happened in 2023 and in 2024. All those solar eclipses is actually correlated with the blood moon that's taking place right now. When you understand the numerical codex, like I broke down in the beginning of the video. So when you go back to that publication, I'm gonna show you guys the picture, screenshot it.
Difference between a solar eclipse and a lunar eclipse, and it's kind of night and day.
The moon casts a shadow on the Earth during the solar eclipse, but during a lunar eclipse, it is the moon that goes into the Earth's shadow.
And while you can see a lunar eclipse every few years on Earth, it's rare to be in full totality of one. And that's why the lunar eclipse that's coming up is so interesting. Everyone in North America will get to experience this full totality in what is known as a blood moon.
The entirety of the moon is fully in the Earth's shadow, and we get that very deep, dark brown, reddish color of the moon. And that happens because the sun's light, even though the sun's light is blocked out, some of the light passes through the Earth's atmosphere and gets scattered, and the light that reaches the moon is very reddish in color.
Unlike the solar eclipse, Dr. Vandenberg says that you don't need special glasses for viewing, and looking at the moon with your naked eye won't hurt you. And he says that if you use a telescope or binoculars, it can only enhance your viewing of this totality that will last just over an hour.
Now, you got to understand the properties of these celestial bodies when they're operating from a place of judgment. One thing you got to understand is that the negative factions of the Gentiles of your so-called Bible, when you're talking about the Canaanites, the Amorites, or the Druids, or the Celtics, these are basically Luciferians. So what happens is they operate off the energy of the moon because their genetics basically harmonize with it, because that basically creates this energy of a beast energy, right? Because it tells you in the book of Leviticus, it talks about the beast. Who is the beast? It's the Canaanite. I told you in the book of Revelations, the transliteration of it, El's Holy Injil 17:17. The evil reptilian gave power to the beast. The reptilians, the archons, are the ones who brought the moon into our solar system. The beast is the Canaanite. So they rule by way of the energy of the moon. So be very meticulous and wary of those who have that 6 ether genetical properties, meaning that they vibrate off the frequency in the octave of the moon. So it can be a transmutation of negative energy that can basically be emitted during the process of this celestial phenomenon.
An hour. And while you can view this eclipse from anywhere, Dr. Vandenberg says that St. Vincent College will be welcoming people onto campus to watch with students and faculty alike and to have a great shared scientific experience.
We don't know a lot about the origin of the moon, its history, its geology. So we don't necessarily learn a lot about those things during lunar eclipses, but one thing it shows us is that the sky is a very spectacular place. It's one of the things that makes studying astronomy so enjoyable.
Now again, full totality for this blood moon will be around 2:25 in the morning on Friday, March 14th. So if you want to see it, you're either going to have to stay up late or get up very early. Reporting from the Angelo Tiani Planetarium at St. Vincent College, Krista Rose, KDKA TV News.
I find it funny that they always trying to make it some type of like this is a fun event. You know what I'm saying? If these people, talking about they Christians and things of that nature and they follow their religions, they would know that all these planetary alignments is basically an omen. There's nothing, fun about what's going on or what's going to be taking place. It's time to get very serious about our spirituality. It's time to get very serious about what's going to be taking place, because after these alignments, all hell's going to break loose. Because not only that, you're going to have Aries and Neptune, right? That's going to be spiritual revolution that's going to be taking place on the planet. So you got to be very meticulous of what's going to be going down, right? And I'm going to break that down as we get through the transmission. So we got to be very serious about what's going on. Everybody that's been called as conspiracy theorists, we up, 30 points. You know what I'm saying? The game is damn near over. That's why everything has to reset. We in this simulation right now, right? So, like I said, the celestial alignment, the celestial phenomenon of the blood moon is going to happen on 3:14. So I went to John 3:14. It talks about how Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness. We in the 9th year, the cosmic serpent, 2025, right? This year of the serpent, the year of resurrection, the year of the Son of Man, the Messianic figure. That's why we're going back to the galactic center, the soul of man, Solomon's temple. That's what this is all about, right? That's how you unlock the keys of the universe when you're talking about the 3, 6, and the 9. You got to understand the esoteric sciences of it, right? Because we're ascending back to the light God, which is the light body, your etheric self. Now, so like I said, this is all based on alignments, right? You got to understand that planetary alignments basically corresponds with your chakra system, right? So it talks about the Christmas tree as a symbol for the pineal gland and chakras. So when you understand the esoteric science of Christmas, a lot of Christians, old time Christians, they believe that Jesus was around March 25th when he was born, around the time of the spring equinox. The spring equinox was around March 25th in the 1st century, right? And then you had the Passover. And the Passover, which was basically around the time Jesus was conceived, right? So that's why March is basically correlated with this energy of a Christ consciousness that's going to be amplified by way of the Holy Grail. The Holy Grail is your activation of the crown chakra. You cannot be holy until you're a whole brain thinker, to where you're able to facilitate the left and the right hemisphere of the brain. So that's why when you graduate college or when you graduate school, you always put the tassel from right to left or left to right, whatever side that you put it on, you put it over because you moved up a degree. When you move up a degree, that means that you activated something within your physiology. But that's on a pseudo side. That's connected to the indoctrination programs of their curricular system, right? So you cannot be holy until you become a whole brain thinker. So that activates the extra neurons in the brain, because the more neurons, it activates the magnetites and the dendrites, and the magnetites and the dendrites ties both hemispheres of the brain together to where you become a whole brain thinker. That is what makes you holy. That is what Christ consciousness is. That's how you use 90% of the cerebral capacity that you haven't used yet, right? That is basically the Holy Grail, right? That's how you break out of the encryption of the Saturn gate and the Moon gate, because the Saturn gate and the Moon gate, the Saturn gate puts an encryption over the mind. The Moon gate puts an encryption over the planet because it works in harmony with the firmament. The firmament is being controlled by archons and draconians, right? So when you break out of the galactic center and you go back to the Father, that's when you unlock the black chakra, which is the pineal gland, the Christ oil, Christ consciousness, Ophiuchus, right? That's what this is all about. So don't be surprised if something happens around March 25th, around this time, to where they can subjugate the energies to where you don't unlock the Christ or the pineal gland oil, to where you basically unravel the Holy Grail that basically facilitates the DNA format to where you're able to harmonize with planet Earth again. So now, the last time we had a blood moon lunar eclipse was in November of 2022. And that's when you had Russo-Ukrainian war and 2022 Russian invasion of Ukraine. So you seen in my last transmission when you had Donald Trump, he was basically beefing with Zelensky in the Ukrainian mafia when you're talking about the Khazars, right? Who are basically the personification of the Canaanites, right? And the Canaanites were basically the ones in control of ancient Babylon. These is basically the eradication process of the Babylonian bloodline that is controlling everything in modern day Babylon, which is America. So what happened on November 2022? You had the invasion of Ukraine by way of Russia, right? That's what happened. So I'm gonna show you this video. So, because during this process, usually around this time of blood moons and stuff like that and lunar eclipses, that's when you start to have an invasion. But since time is starting to speed up, because they have to create the sustainable development goals for Agenda for 2030, they got to speed up the timeline because they basically running out of time. So whatever they got to do, as far as like, you know, unaliving many different people, many different demographics of people, they have to do it in a far of an incantation. They got to do it. They got to speed up the timeline right now. So that's why you got to be very meticulous of going around large crowds or low vibrational people, because what's going to happen is going to activate these ectoplasm demons and these apparitions to where they're going to try to carry out certain agendas by way of these celestial alignments. So I'm going to show you this video for a second. All right. And it's going to be talking about how Europe is basically preparing for war, right? Because one thing you got to understand about the simulation, everything operates on the second limb of a cycle. It's a fourth turning. So when you have a fourth turning, that's when you have an unraveling, then you have a crisis. So by way of this celestial alignments, and we're going through the Golden Gate, they want to subjugate the energy by keeping us away from the fifth dimensional energy that's connected to the galactic center, because it happens by way of human consciousness. Human consciousness has the ability to manipulate physical matter. So this is why they got to hit you with many different psychological operations, many different black swan events, orchestrated events. They trying to subjugate the Christ consciousness. And I'm going to demonstrate that as I show you this video.
In the various meetings in the last few weeks, most recently 2 days ago in London, the answer from European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament. And Europe is ready to massively boost its defense spending, both to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security. And this is why today I have written a letter to the leaders ahead of Thursday's Europe.
Notice you see that at the bottom. It talks about the unrealistic Ukrainian war, because I told you the last time that we had a blood moon lunar eclipse was in November of 2022. Now we're going into March 14th of 2025, and they're talking about war again. Everything operates on a cycle. The universe is mathematical, because by way of the binary code system, the numerical spectrum operates like a Rubik's Cube, meaning that it has to shift the energy that's conducive to the timeline of their Bible.
European Council. This is why we are here together today. I have outlined in this letter to the leaders the Rearm Europe plan. This set of proposals focuses on how to use all the financial levers at our disposal in order to help member states to quickly and significantly increase expenditures in defense capabilities, urgently now, but also over a longer period of time over this decade.
If I am to be changed and I'll hear
how can I put it? With what's happening with the support to change me, it will not be easy, because it is not enough to simply hold elections. You would need to prevent me from participating in the elections, and it will be a bit more difficult. So they'll have to negotiate with me, and I said that I'm exchanging it for NATO membership, and then it means that I fulfilled my mission. There is NATO. It means I've fulfilled my mission.
The Prime Minister says he's open to Australia sending peacekeepers to Ukraine in a bid to ensure a ceasefire. But in the lead up to the election, the coalition has signalled that it wouldn't back that move.
Donald Trump has just frozen military aid to Ukraine indefinitely. Why is that?
Look, I think this is part of a greater...
This is what you gotta understand. What is Trump doing to Ukraine? Trump is basically draining the swamp. He wants to be the personification of the savior, which is basically a false messianic figure. Just like you having a Luciferian reset, you having a planetary reset. You have a real messianic figure, which is the 144,000, which is a frequency of people who is vibrating at a mental frequency that's beyond the limitations of the third dimension, versus the so-called savior, which is going to be the personification of the Antichrist, which is could be AI, it could be Elon Musk, it can be, you know, the St. Peter Roman, the Black Pope that's going to be in inside the Vatican once Pope Francis, once he whatever happens to him. Like I said, there's many different ways that you can look at it, but like I said, you got to look at this from a multi-dimensional standpoint, right? So like I said, Donald Trump is playing both sides. He's not draining the swamp because he wants to. He's draining the swamp because he has to, right? And the reason he has to is because he knows, by way of universal law, he has to give back the cosmic keys to the people who are basically owners of the planet, right? Who was actually the personification of the Semitic people of the Bible, right? Which is your so-called your indigenous people, right? So that's how you got to look at this. So like I said, the reason I talk about, you know, you got to go into biblical context so much, because you got to understand that the great majority of people on the planet are so submerged into monotheistic religion. So you got to meet them at their level. And the best way to meet them at their level is to propagate the Bible, because that's all some people know. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna show you demonstrations of the Bible to pull you out of the religion, to show you the true knowledge that they're not showing you in the news, right?
Negotiating tactic, Andrew. The bottom line is President Zelensky should do two things. Number one, sign that mineral seal. Number two, apologize to President Trump and thank the American people. If those two things happen, Ukraine will be secure. If U.S. interests commercially are aligned with Ukraine, our companies, our workers, that's probably the greatest protection and security that he could possibly get.
After the Oval Office smackdown heard around the world, 47 sending the Ukrainian leader to his room for having a bad attitude on a potential peace deal with Russia. And instead of apologizing, Zelensky was running over to his European friends, where he said, quote, an agreement to end the war is still very, very far away, and no one has started all these steps yet. President Trump.
Now, remember, I showed you in the last transmission, I was telling you guys about the movie Childhood's End. I hope you guys watched that movie, because I told y'all this is the closest thing to the truth. Because when the supervisor of planet Earth, he came to the planet, he basically eradicated war. What is Donald Trump trying to do? He's trying to eradicate war. He wants to look like the savior, right? So, like I said, they put the truth in the movies because, like I said, the CIA has an office in Hollywood and Hollywood has an office in the CIA. So they understand the timeline of events that has to take place by way of the entertainment that's basically in the movies. Because the movies is going to tell you the truth every time. And it operates by way of the threefold law. They got to put the truth in the movies. So if you haven't watched the movie Childhood's End, it's telling you everything that's basically correlated to everything that's taking place in our reality, in our timeline right now, because Donald Trump is talking about the golden age and basically eradicating war. Just like in a movie, the supervisor of planet Earth, the Archon, was talking about the golden age and basically eradicating war. So like I said, the synchronicities are sinking. Illuminati, I'm on to you. I'm on to you.
Trump, not happy with that one.
He should be more appreciative because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us. I want one thing to happen. I want all of those young people to stop being killed. They're being killed by the thousands every single week. The money is one thing, but the death, and they're losing thousands of soldiers a week. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time. And he better not be right about that. That's all I'm saying. Now, maybe somebody doesn't want to make a deal. And if somebody doesn't want to make a deal, I think that person won't be around very long.
President Trump also teasing that he'll have more to say on a minerals deal with Ukraine during his joint address to Congress, which you can catch special coverage starting tomorrow at 9 Eastern right here on Fox News Channel. Meanwhile, the Democrats and the media are screaming, Russia, Russia, Russia.
The White House has become an arm of the Kremlin.
The Kremlin is delighted.
The only winner in that exchange.
Now, there's a synchronicity. I just now realized that. Now, the arm of Kremlin, now the Archon's name in the movie Childhood's End was Karelin. Not a coincidence, right? And they talking about the arm of Kremlin. And watch the movie Childhood's End, the supervisor of planet Earth, the Archon, his name was Krellin, right? And he came back to the planet to basically save planet Earth, but he was operating from a place of deception. Watch that movie, please. It's 3 episodes. You can get it on YouTube. You can purchase it, and it's yours forever on YouTube. Please watch it. And then watch this video and the last video I put out. And then you're going to be like, oh, okay, I see what's going on now.
Exchange is Putin.
He's very much in Putin's camp.
As far as I'm concerned, he is an enemy to the United States.
And Secretary Rubio's.
Here's the thing, though. The Democrats committed treason by giving money to Ukraine, right? Because like I said, I already broke down where the inception of the bloodline, where the Ukrainian mafia came from. They came from the Canaanites, right? Those are the Gentiles of the Bible when you understand the book of Leviticus, right? By way of Levitical law, that means that their genetics doesn't harmonize with the planet. So that's why, as far as like, not even just, treason in American soil, they committed cosmic treason, right? Because they got that moon over here in our solar system, the fake moon, which is basically the external hard drive of the planet Earth. That moon is only correlated to a certain faction who is actually the Canaanite, who is actually the Ukrainians. All the same bloodline. They do Babylonian blood magic, Babylonian money magic, Babylonian incantations that works in harmony with the moon, right? That's where the apex of the inception of where the Ukrainians came from. They're Canaanites. You got to understand the history in order to get to the bottom of it, right? There's no such thing as a democracy. How can, you know what I'm saying? They talking about treason and, a part of being in, Putin's camp or whatever. The Democrats committed treason because there's no such thing as democracy. Like I told you, you break down the etymology of the word democracy, it means demonic rulership. Then you look at the suffix of the word krasi, it means kratos. Kratos is krasi, which is Kronos, who is the god of Saturn, which is Satan, right? Who is Father Time, who is Yaldabaoth, Yahweh, Enlil. These are archons, right? So not only did they commit treason, they committed cosmic treason.
Enemy to the United States.
And Secretary Rubio is pointing out how President Trump would be getting a Nobel Peace Prize over his efforts to end the war if only there was a D next to his name.
Shouldn't we all be happy that we have a president who's trying to stop wars and prevent them instead of start them? And I just don't get it. I really don't, other than the fact that it's Donald J. Trump. If this was a Democrat that was doing this, everyone would be saying, well, he's on his way to the Nobel Peace Prize. This is absurd.
No, I will say this. The other thing that's funny.
Now, the main reason why the Democrats they have a veneration for war because they're trying to stagnate the energy of the consciousness on the planet. Because by way of symbolism, sigils of everything that's taking place, you're talking about the black swan and all this other stuff, energy of Ophiuchus, planetary alignments, blood moons, solar eclipses. All this stuff is basically trying to stagnate the energy of the Christ consciousness because the energy is here. We're going through the galactic center. That's how you get to the fifth dimension. You travel on 0-point energy fields. The planet Earth is traveling on 0-point energy fields that has magnetic filaments that speeds up the vibration of planet Earth till it's able to ascend out of the Silver Gate and the Saturn Gate. That's what's happening. So they want war. The reason they want war is to basically subjugate the energy because they need fear. When you propagate fear so much, that's when the archons is able to feed in the form of a sacrifice by way of the embodiment of the moon. Right?
Zelensky left the United States, went over to Europe, where immediately the UK's Prime Minister Starmer said that they will put boots on the ground, planes in the air. The French president said that they're willing to up their percentage of GDP of defense spending to 3.5%. It's the effect of Donald Trump is having a ripple effect across the pond as well. But the bottom line is that you want to talk about promises that he made. Donald Trump campaigned on bringing peace back to an unstable world. For 4 years, there wasn't an invasion or incursion across the world, not just in Ukraine and in Russia, but throughout the world. And under Joe Biden, the world fell apart. So Donald Trump wants to bring peace. He didn't ask to come back in and deal with the situation.
For your information, the United States is not the world, but I'm going to let you cook.
In Gaza or the situation in Ukraine. In fact, when he left office, he had utter peace throughout the world. The world was calmer and safer under his leadership. But look, I think you got to look at the context of that meeting. Number one, General Keith Kellogg, the president's envoy to Ukraine, had met with Zelensky the week before and said, don't come to the U.S. to just have a show, sign the deal, and then we'll make things happen. Zelensky went against that advice, came over, met with a bunch of Democratic senators, Chris Murphy of Connecticut, several others, including the rumors are at least Susan Rice from the Biden administration and potentially Victoria Nuland. I don't know if they set that guy up or not, but the idea of going into a Oval Office meeting and looking smug and arrogant as if he was giving us something definitely did not look like the thing that, I was there, Andrew. I posted some stuff on social media. The White House was ready for a quick press spray, a meeting, a lunch with the signing. And then.
So what you're looking at is you got the white hats versus the black hats. Donald Trump is a white hat. The deep state shadow government are black hats. White hats are Luciferians. Black hats are Satanists. You got to understand what's taking place. And that's why he's wearing a black shirt. He's a black hat. That's why you see the sigil of Moloch, the sigil of Lucifer. You got to understand what's going on by way of the symbolism and the colorology. That's why you got to watch the last video I put out. Watch every video that I've put out. Because like I said, it's not one of those things where I'm just speaking about certain things that other people are missing out on. And it's one of those things you got to look at the whole picture, full spectrum, in order to understand what's taking place in this video. So that's why I say you got to watch all of them. Because like I said, it's a timeline, right? I'm following the timeline.
At a press conference afterwards to announce the deal. This White House was ready to go. And when Zelensky was pulling out of the West Wing driveway, I was talking to folks in the driveway at the time, and I said, if he pulls out of this driveway, it's over. And I think that what President Trump is showing is that you made a big mistake. You came over here and tried to embarrass us. He thinks somehow he's on equal footing with President Trump. And respectfully, this isn't about who's bigger or smaller or what have you. But the bottom line is that they wouldn't be in the position that they are without the United States. President Trump wants peace, full stop. And he is the only one that can negotiate a lasting peace. So the idea that Zelensky came over here to lecture us and to lecture our administration after everything that the United States has put out for them was just a stupid, stupid diplomatic move.
We don't want to go over there and get in between a family fight. We did. It's 3 years later.
I'm still waiting to hear what Jessica's plan is to remove Russia from eastern Ukraine.
What?
We haven't heard that yet from you. So until you tell us what your peace deal is, I think this is probably the better deal.
Really?
Jessica, how are you going to get the Russians out of eastern Ukraine?
You make a deal
if the
with
Ukrainians
them.
you make a deal with them.
But the deal is not giving up all of Ukrainian territory and calling him a dictator when he's clearly not.
Okay, so how do you get them to stop fighting and get Russia to leave the country?
I don't know.
I don't know is your answer. I don't know.
Sorry, I left my 4 stars at home when I came into work. I'm just saying, the guy is talking like a Kremlin plant.
If you can't do it militarily, you got to go do it at the negotiating table.
You know what? The truth is that Donald Trump's job is to get a deal, and that means you don't take one side or the other.
He's taking
and their
one side.
interpretation of his not taking, of his
Brett
not
says we have to go.
criticizing
Stop.
Putin is that he's pro-Putin. He's a deal maker.
Okay.
So with that being said, we're going to go back to the transmission at hand. So I had to show you those videos so you can understand what time it is. So I can show you and give you clarification about what's actually taking place in the news media and how it correlates with the celestial alignments and historical context, because it all works in harmony. So the last time that we had a lunar blood moon eclipse was on November 2022, and that's when you had Russia invading Ukraine. Now you fast forward to March, going into March 14th, where we're going to have a blood moon lunar eclipse. They're already arguing on media, in the news media outlets, talking about war, right? So I showed you this in the last video. Like I said, these are all lunar doctrines. The evil reptilian gave power to the beast. The reptilian gave the beast the edification of religion, because the religion was another way to take us out of our sovereign capacity by way of the religion that connects us to the caste system that puts us under the jurisdiction under the 14th Amendment, right? So the religion, when you go to the G3526 Strong Concordance, the word Christian translates to the word black. The word black goes all the way to the 1724 Black Christian codes, right? So when you call yourself these nomenclature titles, it makes you non-descendable in government, because you don't have a pedigree and you don't have a title of nobility that connects you right back to the birthright of planet Earth, right? By way of your native indigenous bloodline, right? So that's what you see right here. This is basically the edification of tricknology and semantics with the propagation of a lunar doctrine, right? This is a grimoire, a book of spells. That's what the Bible is, if you don't understand how to read it. If you know how to read it, that's when you break the spell. You break the spell of King Gu. The spell of King Gu is the sleep spell of materialism. The sleep spell of materialism is connected to the moon. The moon is energy and motion, because your emotions is connected to everything as far as people, places, and possessions. That is a sleep spell that the Vatican Popes of Rome was facilitated by the archons of the Draconians. So that's why the Pope had to unlock the keys of papacy of the galactic center. When you're talking about the galactical plane, going back into the Sirius star constellation that basically works in harmony with the black chakra, which is the pineal gland when it's activated. So that's why during the time of the February 28 planetary alignment, a lot of people's pineal glands, they felt like a buzzing right here. It was like a energy, a certain stimulation that was basically in the middle of their forehead. Because this hat of Dagon is basically a false representation of the pineal gland, which is basically the pine cone. So when you unlock these keys, the January 21st alignment, February 28th alignment, it activates the pineal gland. Going back to the galactic center, because the galactic center is basically the embodiment of God, the cosmic keys that unlocks. So that's why when you look at the geographical display of the Vatican, it shows you the pine cone, the pineal gland, the microcosmic aspect of it being locked. Once it's unlocked, that's when you go through the energy of Ophiuchus, which is Jesus walking on water, which is basically a form of resurrection, right? Resurrection and rebirth in the 9-year. When you study the supreme mathematical sequence of the 5% nation, the number 9 represents reborn, rejuvenation, rebirth, resurrection. That's what you're looking at right here, right? So when he used these keys, the keys of papacy, right? It unlocked the galactic center. When you see the sun right here, you're going into the galactic center, going into the golden gate. This right here you see in the middle is a representation of Dagon, a false representation, but it represents the pineal gland, because Dagon is an archon that put an encryption over the pineal gland. So what the Pope did on January 21st with these keys, right? What he did with the keys is that he unlocked the galactic center that unlocks the encryption over the pineal gland when you understand the holonomic brain theory, right? Because in putting it, just like you have an encryption over the planet, you have an encryption over the brain. You got to study the CIA documents. So now, since it's unlocked, this is where you get the fall of religion. This is why your so-called Pope is actually sick right now, right? That's what's taking place. So this is all about the mystery of the lawlessness that was basically facilitated by the Vatican popes of Rome that subjugated the pineal gland by way of indoctrination of the curriculum of westernized, organized religion, which is basically European mythology. So the mystery of occultism. So you got the largest pine cone is at the Vatican. That's the pineal gland, right? Then you got the Pope, who has the staff of the pineal gland, the staff of the pine cone. And then the triple crown, the triple pine who carries the crown. That's what he's wearing on his head, the hat of Dagon, right? Dagon. So also, when you understand Dagon, when you go to the H1408 Strong Concordance, the word God equates to the word Gad. Gad is a anagram for the word Dag. So Dag, D-A-G, is actually Dagon. Dagon is the one who controls the religion by way of the archonic energy that is facilitated by the moon, right? That's what you're looking at. That's what's going on. The Christ consciousness is here. Now we got to find a way to activate it, right? And over the course of time, I'm going to break down all these transmissions, and I'm going to show you how to unlock the apex of your pineal gland as we're going through the spiritual metamorphosis, right? So also on March 30th of 2025, you got Neptune enters Aries. Now, this is a big day because Neptune leaves his home sign of Pisces. Because like I said, the Piscean age of darkness was facilitated by the lunar cycle to move into the uncharted realms of Aries. Because like I said, Aries and Libra is basically the personification of going through the Golden Gate. So when you have Neptune entering Aries, this is basically the apex of spiritual revolution. So this will be the ship that will bring major transformations, which will make many of us surprised. So don't be surprised if more planes is coming down. Don't be surprised if we have a mothership over the planet. Don't be surprised of anything that's going to be taking place from the month of March going all the way up until 2030. Don't be surprised about a damn thing, right? That's why you got to stay on your square. You got to understand what's going on. You got to understand the signs of the times. Because here's where things get eerie. I got this off Blue Pill's page. Shout out to Blue Pill. That's my big brother. Salute to the guy Blue Pill. And he posted this on his Instagram. He said, here's where things get eerie. The last time Neptune was in Aries, the United States was in the middle of a civil war. And guess what? Back then, the revolutionary Uranus was in communication focused and idea oriented around Gemini, just like it will be in the late 2020s. Every time Uranus has entered Gemini in U.S. history, a major war followed. You had the American Revolution, Civil War, and then you have World War II. So, like I said, that's why I show veneration and credence to the ancestors in my last video, in the beginning of the video. Everything that they've been talking about in the early, 1970s, 1980s, early 2000s, 1990s, everything that they've been talking about from Brother Panic, Bobby Hemmett, Dr. Malachi Z. York, all Malcolm X, Sister Renita L, they've been talking about this, the timeline that we own, they've been talking about this all these years, and now we in the meat and potatoes of it. It's about to get very interesting, so that's why we have to be very meticulous about staying in alignment. Stop letting people pull on your energy, because you're going to need that energy to get to the apex of your higher self, to basically detach yourself from the distractions that's going to be facilitated when Neptune is in Aries. Right? So be very meticulous of the date of 322, because 322 is basically the embodiment of Skull and Bones, which is basically the epitome for the season of sacrifice, right? So this is all based on Babylonian blood magic, right? So this is a timeline of the seasons of sacrifice and blood rituals that you see taking place. You have the Baltimore riots, you got the San Francisco earthquakes. Take a screenshot of this. All this stuff is going to be correlated in the timeline that we basically in right now. So screenshot this. And screenshot this one as well. We in a season of sacrifice. So don't be surprised if a big time rapper gets unalived. Something happened to a big, podcasting person, or, persons like Charleston White. Don't be surprised, because this is the season of sacrifice. And they need a sacrifice to happen in order to withstand the three-dimensional illusion. That's what the sacrifices is for. They got to have the sacrifices to the archons to keep temporal power over the third-dimensional realm. That's what the sacrifices is basically for. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I got to go pick up my son from school, and I'm in the process of moving. So I'm very busy. I just got out of the gym. So that's what like I said, I am a triple Libra. I got to balance all these energies all at once to where I can basically, become my best self, my higher self. So this video is basically dedicated to, the Draconian blood moon, right? That is going to be a lunar eclipse. And when you look at the numerical spectrum of it, from March 14th to September 7th of 2025 is exactly 177 days. March 29th to September 21st is 177 days. So from March 14th to September 21st of 2025 is 191 days. From March 29th of 2025 and September 7th of 2025 is 163 days. So you take 191 days plus 163 days, you get 354 days. You divide it by 2, you get 177 days. So you got 3 increments of 177. So you take that, you times it by 3, you get 531. 5 plus 3 plus 1 equals 9. That is basically the epitome of 9 ether activation. And then you take 177 divided by 3, you get 59. 5 plus 9 equals 14. Piece of Osiris, which is resurrection, rebirth, as we go to the galactic center that activates the pineal gland, because the pineal gland is basically a microcosm of the galactic center when you're talking about the energy of Ophiuchus. And then from October 14th, which is on my birthday, when you have the Ring of Fire solar eclipse, that is basically 518 days from March 14th of 2025. So then you take 5 plus 1 plus 8 equals 14 divided by 2, you get 7. That is basically unlocking the scroll of all, which is your 7 chakra systems. And then when you go to Revelations 5:18, it talks about the scroll of the Lamb, which is your tablets of destiny, which is basically the halls of Amenti as you go through the galactic center to where you're no longer subjugated by the dualistic energies of the three-dimensional matrix. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, that's what this video is all about. You got to understand how the numerical codex works in harmony with monotheistic context and planetary bodies. You can't look at everything from a one-dimensional perspective. You got to see the full puzzle piece. Because if you don't see the full puzzle piece, your ass going to miss the picture every time, right? So it's time to get very serious because now everything is going to start speeding up in vibration, right? We was just, you know what I'm saying, talking about all these snowstorms, and now here we are, you know, in March. The weather's about to break. You're going to see more coronal mass ejections because the coronal mass ejections manipulates the liquid crystal polarization that bends the photon light spectrum, right? So that's going to reverse the polarity of everything that travels on 0-point energy fields. So that means that the planet is going back into the galactic center. So when the planet goes back to the galactic center, that's when you get the planet start to speed up in vibration so much to where it creates time dilation. Time is starting to speed up. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for watching this video. And if you're new to the channel, like I said, do not be a monitoring spirit. Subscribe to the channel, please. Over, 60% of the people who watch the channel are not subscribed. Just subscribe to the channel. I'm not asking for no money. Just subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching the video. End of transmission.
10:14. We will put an end to this madness.